On October 24, 79 AD, in the Roman city of Pompeii, the world changed in an instant. A mother shielded her child. We don't know her name, we don't know the child's age, but we know exactly what she was doing when she died, because her final moment was preserved in ash for 2,000 years. This is the story of Pompeii, the city that died and revealed everything. Part 1. The City Before Catastrophe. To understand Pompeii, you need to understand that it didn't start as the thriving Roman city we know from archaeology. It had a long history, and that history shaped everything about what it would become. Pompeii wasn't always Roman. It wasn't always important. It was built on a volcanic plain by the Oscans around 740 BCE, a small settlement near the mouth of the Sarno River. At that point, it was just another Mediterranean settlement, unremarkable, probably concerned with fishing and local agriculture. When the Greeks arrived, everything changed. They weren't conquerors coming to destroy and dominate. They were traders and settlers, and they transformed Pompeii into something significant. They built temples, beautiful structures that spoke to the gods. They introduced trade routes that connected this small town to the entire Mediterranean world. They established systems of culture and governance. Suddenly, Pompeii mattered, a series of empires. By the 6th century BC, Pompeii was thriving enough to surround itself with an impressive defensive wall. That alone tells you this wasn't a random settlement anymore. This was a city with power and wealth. The port flourished with merchant ships. Maritime trade brought merchants from across the Mediterranean, from North Africa, from Syria, from Egypt, from Phoenicia. The city became a crossroads. The Etruscans came next, controlling the city without conquering it militarily. They weren't a civilization that expanded through destruction. They were traders and builders. They built the Temple of Apollo, establishing systems of governance that would influence the city for centuries. But their rule didn't last. In 474 BC, the Greeks defeated them and Greek influence returned. Then the Samnites arrived around 400 to 24 BC. Warriors from central Italy, they were a powerful military force, and they ruled Pompeii for 4 centuries. And here's what's important. During this time, Pompeii expanded dramatically. The Forum was built, the central marketplace and heart of civic life. The large theater was constructed, a massive structure designed to hold thousands of people. Important temples and public buildings arose from the ground. Pompeii became a prosperous, growing city with far-reaching connections across the Mediterranean world. Rome's arrival. But then Rome came. From 343 to 341 BC, Roman armies swept through Italy in the Samnite Wars. Pompeii couldn't resist. It was forced to become an ally of Rome. Not quite conquered in the traditional sense, not quite free, but bound to Roman interests. The city remained faithful to Rome through wars and rebellions for over 2 centuries. It paid its taxes. It sent soldiers when Rome asked. It maintained its loyalty. In 89 BC, everything changed. The social war erupted, a rebellion of Italian cities against Rome. Pompeii joined the rebels. It was a mistake. Roman General Lucius Cornelius Sulla, a ruthless military commander, besieged the city. You can still see the impact craters from his ballista shots in the city walls today, massive holes from ancient artillery, evidence of a bombardment that lasted weeks. Pompeii surrendered when neighboring Nola fell. Sulla made Pompeii a Roman colony. He gave land to his war veterans, and many Pompeians lost their property. It was a harsh punishment for rebellion. But here's what's remarkable. Instead of declining, the city thrived. Something special happened. The influx of Roman settlers brought new wealth, new connections, new opportunities. The city was granted Roman citizenship. Full citizenship, not just the second-class status given to many conquered cities. Something about Pompeii appealed to the Romans. Maybe it was the location. Maybe it was the beauty. Maybe it was just good luck. By the 1st century AD, Pompeii had transformed into something unmistakably Roman. But it wasn't Rome itself. It was something far more revealing. A provincial city. Middle class. Merchants living alongside craftspeople and artisans. Slaves working alongside free citizens. Gladiators, prostitutes, politicians, children, families. A complete cross-section of Roman society, all preserved in one place. The city layout. The city itself was organized in a way that tells us everything about Roman urban planning. Pompeii covers 66 hectares divided into 9 regions. It's not chaotic, it's deliberate. The Forum sits at the central marketplace and government center, the beating heart of the city where civic business was conducted. An impressive amphitheater holds about 20,000 people, which is roughly the entire city's population. Everyone could fit inside. It was a place where a society gathered. There are at least 31 bakeries spread throughout the city. 31. This wasn't a city that imported bread. It made its own, constantly, every day. Nearly 100 Thermopolia. These are ancient fast food restaurants where the working class grabbed lunch between jobs. There are elaborate bathhouses where citizens could socialize and clean themselves. Temples where they worshipped. Theaters where they were entertained. A brothel with explicit frescoes where people conducted another aspect of Roman life. And homes. Homes ranging from luxurious villas with multiple courtyards and fine mosaics to small apartments where the working families lived in just a few rooms. In many ways, Pompeii was a normal Roman city, but it was frozen in time, preserved in a way no other city has been. The earthquake, a city under stress. Then on February 5th, 62 AD, an earthquake hit Pompeii. Not a minor tremor, not something people could laugh off. A catastrophic earthquake that registered between 5 and 6 on the Richter scale. Buildings collapsed, people died, fires broke out throughout the city. For a society without earthquake-resistant engineering, without steel and concrete and seismic design, this was a disaster of unimaginable proportions. But here's what's crucial for understanding the eruption. Pompeii was still in recovery from this earthquake when Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD. 17 years had passed. Some buildings had been repaired. Others were still under construction. Some damage was never fully fixed. You can see this in the archaeology. Evidence of ongoing repairs, unfinished walls, buildings still being restored. This wasn't a city at its peak. This was a city that had survived one catastrophe and was still rebuilding when another struck. But it was resilient. Life had returned. Trade had continued. Children went to school. People made plans for the future. They assumed they had time. They were wrong. Part 2. The Eruption. When the mountain woke. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD wasn't a single event. It wasn't a quick explosion that ended in an afternoon. It was a 2-day catastrophe, a series of increasingly violent pulses from the earth that would erase an entire city and the thousands of people living in it. For centuries, historians believed the eruption took place in August, as it seemed logical given the summer heat and the nature of Mount Vesuvius. But in 2022, a collaborative international study determined the actual date by examining evidence that had been sitting in museums for generations. The evidence was hidden in the smallest details. People buried in ash wore heavier clothing than typical summer wear. They were wearing long sleeves, layers. In August in southern Italy, people wear light clothing to stay cool, but October clothing is heavier. The fruits and vegetables in shops are October varieties, not August varieties. Pomegranates ripen in October, not August. Chestnuts found in preserved storage containers don't ripen until mid-September. Wine fermenting jars had been sealed, which happened around late October to preserve the wine for winter. Every single detail, clothing, fruit, seeds, wine jars, pointed to October. October 24th or 25th, 79 AD. That's when the world changed. When darkness fell at noon. Around 1 p.m. on that October afternoon, Mount Vesuvius exploded. But calling it an explosion is like calling a tsunami a big wave. This wasn't a normal eruption. This was a Plinian eruption, named after Pliny the Younger, who observed it from a distance and left written descriptions. A Plinian eruption is one of the most violent eruption types possible on Earth. The force was so tremendous it punched through the atmosphere like a nuclear blast. Scientists estimated the eruption column rose approximately 33 kilometers into the atmosphere, higher than the cruising altitude of commercial airplanes, high enough that it was visible from 150 kilometers away. But what came first wasn't lava. Lava doesn't fall from the sky, it comes later. What came first was ash. Superheated pumice and ash falling at 180 miles per hour, the speed of a powerful hurricane. Imagine standing outside in afternoon sunlight, feeling the warmth of the sun on your face. And suddenly it becomes complete darkness. Not twilight, not dusk, not the dimness of a heavy storm. Total blackness in the middle of the day. The sun disappeared. It became as dark as midnight. People couldn't see their hands in front of their faces. The temperature spiked. The air became toxic, filled with sulfur dioxide and other volcanic gases that burned the lungs when people tried to breathe. And the ash kept falling, falling and falling and falling and didn't stop. For about 18 hours this continued. Pumice stones, the size of grapefruits, rained down pumices of volcanic rock so light and porous it can float on water, but it's still hard as stone. These stones fell from the sky like a bombardment. Ash accumulated so quickly that people who tried to run found themselves buried up to their knees, then their waists, then their chests. Some people escaped. Historians estimate that of the 20,000 people who lived in Pompeii, approximately 1,150 bodies have been found in the city out of a total population of 20,000. This means maybe 95% of the people who lived in Pompeii survived this eruption. Many of them, perhaps most of them, probably survived. They ran. They fled to the countryside. Some probably made it in Naples or other nearby cities. They lived to see the next day. But not everyone. Pyroclastic surge. Around midnight on October 25th, after nearly 18 hours of pumice and ash falling, something far worse happened. A pyroclastic surge. A pyroclastic surge is one of nature's most violent and terrifying phenomena. It's not lava. It's a wave of superheated gas and rock and ash traveling at approximately 70 miles per hour, moving faster than a car on a highway, moving with the speed of hurricane wind. The temperature is extraordinarily high, exceeding 300 degrees Celsius. For context, that's hot enough to ignite wood spontaneously, hot enough to boil blood, hot enough to kill instantly. It's not a temperature you can survive for even a second. When this surge hit Pompeii around midnight, people died in seconds. The heat was so intense that it flash-heated human bodies instantly. Blood boiled in veins. Muscles contracted violently in death. Organs vaporized. People's final expressions, terror, resignation, peace, were locked into their faces in that instant of death. Some people had been trying to escape. Others were huddled together, some were alone. It didn't matter. Death came for everyone equally and indiscriminately. Then the ash cooled and hardened around them. This is the crucial part of the process. As the bodies decomposed over centuries in these sealed, oxygen-free environments, they left perfect molds in the ash, empty spaces shaped exactly like human forms. It wasn't until the 19th century that an archaeologist named Giuseppe Fiorelli realized what these voids actually were. He had an ingenious idea. Why not inject plaster into the voids to recreate the shapes of the dead? He developed this revolutionary technique, and when the plaster hardened and the surrounding ash was carefully removed, the result was extraordinary. You're not looking at bones, you're not looking at sculptures or artistic recreations, you're looking at the exact shape and position of a human body at the moment of death. The details are uncanny. You can see the folds in clothing, the individual fingers, the expression on the face. One cast shows a man with his arm raised, trying to protect someone else. Another shows a woman and child huddled together. Another shows a man covering his face with his hands. Strength meant nothing, wealth meant nothing, power meant nothing. By the next morning, October 25th, 79 AD, it was over. The eruption lasted roughly 24 hours. The city was buried under 6 to 7 meters of volcanic material. That's approximately 20 feet of ash, pumice, and volcanic debris. Buildings partially collapsed under the weight, roofs caved in, walls crumbled, bodies lay in the streets and homes and shops and bathhouses and bedrooms. Everything that made Pompeii a thriving, living city was entombed beneath a gray blanket of ash. But the burial paradoxically preserved it. The lack of oxygen prevented decomposition. The ash protected structures from weather and erosion. For nearly 1,500 years, Pompeii remained locked in a time capsule. Recent discoveries about the eruption. Recent excavations in 2023 and 2024 showed something previously unknown to scholars. Some buildings actually collapsed during the eruption itself from earthquakes that occurred during the volcanic event. The eruption wasn't just about heat and ash, there was seismic activity as well. The ground shook. Buildings that had survived the earthquake of 62 AD didn't survive this. Some people weren't just killed by heat and ash. Some were buried alive as structures failed around them, stones and wooden beams crushing their bodies. How many died from suffocation after the initial heat waves when they tried to dig themselves out of ash that had hardened around them? We may never know. The numbers are hidden in the archaeology. Part 3. What Pompeii reveals about real Roman life. Most of what we know about ancient Rome comes from written sources. Senators' letters, philosophers' treatises, emperors' proclamations. These were written by the wealthy and educated elite. They describe idealized versions of Roman life, filtered through the perspectives and biases of people with power and education. But what about the other 95%? What about the baker who woke up at 4 a.m. every morning to start ovens? What about the prostitute working in the Lupanar? What about the slave who had no legal rights? What about the child who never went to school? What about the shopkeeper trying to make a living in a crowded marketplace? What about the average person who never wrote anything down and whose existence would normally be completely erased from history? Pompeii answers these questions in ways no other archaeological site in the world can, because Pompeii wasn't a palace. It wasn't a temple complex, it was a city. A real city, with real people doing real things. The Alexander Mosaic and merchant wealth. In the House of the Faun, one of the largest and most luxurious homes ever excavated, archaeologists found an Alexander mosaic, a stunning piece of art depicting Alexander the Great in battle. It's intricate, beautiful, created with tiny pieces of colored stone arranged to create a detailed image. The home itself is so elaborate, so beautifully decorated, so large that when historians first studied it, they assumed it must have belonged to a senator or someone of enormous political importance. A magnate. A person at the very top of Roman society. But it didn't. It belonged to a merchant. A businessman. Someone who made their wealth through trade, not through political power. This single fact tells us something revolutionary about Roman society. Beauty and luxury weren't reserved exclusively for the political elite. Ordinary wealthy people, merchants who traded goods, could afford extraordinary art and beauty. They could commission mosaics depicting the greatest battles of history. They could live in homes with multiple courtyards and fountains and decorated walls. This tells us that Roman society was more commercially sophisticated, more economically diverse, more open to ordinary people achieving wealth than historians had previously understood. The Thermopolium, ancient fast food. In December 2020, archaeologists made a discovery that captures working-class life perfectly. They discovered a preserved Thermopolium, an ancient fast food restaurant in Reggio 5, one of the neighborhoods of Pompeii. The moment they opened it up, it was like stepping back in time. Inside were 8 large terracotta pots still containing the remains of meals. Duck bones, goat bones, pig bones, fish bones, and snail shells. These pots were sunk into the counter so that hot food could be kept warm in them, like a modern steam table at a cafeteria. There were frescoes on the walls depicting the food on offer, colorful paintings showing what you could order. A fresco showing a dog on a leash. A decorated bronze drinking bowl, wine flasks, cooking pots, the storage jars of the restaurant. This wasn't the food of the wealthy. Wealthy Romans had slaves preparing elaborate multi-course meals in their homes. And this was working-class food. Lentils, fish sauce, a condiment made from fermented fish that was ubiquitous in Roman cuisine. Quick meals grabbed between jobs by people who didn't have time to go home and cook. And this is remarkable. What's evident from the archaeology is the care that went into this establishment. The frescoes are colorful and detailed. The owner had invested in decoration. This was a real business, serving real people with real economics. The owner took pride in this space. He wanted people to choose his restaurant over the competition. The Bakeries, 31 establishments. The Bakeries tell a similar story, and they tell us something important about daily life. There were at least 31 bakeries in Pompeii, 31 separate businesses whose sole purpose was producing bread. This wasn't a city that imported bread from elsewhere. It produced bread constantly, continuously. Some bakeries were massive operations with multiple ovens and grinding stones for grain. Others were small family businesses operating out of a single storefront. In the Modestus bakery, archaeologists found something extraordinary. When Vesuvius erupted, there were loaves of bread still in the ovens. The heat carbonized them, turned them into charcoal-like blackened forms. You can see the burn marks. You can see the patterns where the baker's hands shaped the dough. It's the most intimate connection we have with individual Romans, the work of their hands. Preserved in carbon, someone woke up in the morning, they ground grain, they kneaded dough, they shaped loaves, they put them in the oven to bake, and then the world ended, and their work was preserved forever. Graffiti, the voice of the voiceless. On the walls of Pompeii, you find graffiti everywhere, scratch marks, charcoal writing, people leaving messages. And what these messages tell us is that Romans 2,000 years ago were fundamentally the same as humans today. Election endorsements, vote for this person. Political campaigns existed. Insults. Quintus is an asshole. Exactly that explicit. People were petty and rude. Love declarations. Primigenius loves Irene. People were romantic. Mathematical exercises scribbled by students, children practicing their lessons. It's crude, it's real, and it's deeply human. People 2,000 years ago had the same sense of humor, the same pettiness, the same capacity for love that we do. They scratch their names and messages into walls, just like we carve initials into trees or write on desks. I was here. I mattered. It's a human impulse that transcends millennia. The house of Julia Felix, business and housing. The house of Julia Felix contained not just a residence, but an entire business operation. There were rental apartments for people who couldn't afford to own homes. There were workshops where artisans worked. There were shops on the street level. It's real insight into how Roman economics actually worked, not the grand trade discussed in merchants' contracts and formal documents, but the everyday hustle of making a living. Someone figured out that they could make money by renting out apartments. Someone invested in property. Someone created a business model. The economics of Pompeii were sophisticated and diverse. The Lupanar, explicit evidence. And then there's the Lupanar, the brothel. It's a 2-story building with explicit artwork on the walls and small rooms designed for specific purposes. Fresco images of sexual acts are painted on walls with surprisingly graphic detail. It's uncomfortable for modern viewers to look at, but it's real evidence of how Romans conducted this aspect of life. Not hidden, not shameful in the way it became later in Christian Europe, not surrounded by moral panic or laws criminalizing sex work, just normal, a business like any other. The owner put up a sign, people came, commerce happened. This tells us that Roman sexual attitudes were radically different from the attitudes that would develop in later centuries. 2024 discoveries, Helen and Paris, seasons. In April 2024, archaeologists discovered a dining hall with rare frescoes depicting mythological scenes. Helen of Troy and Paris, the legendary lovers whose affair sparked the Trojan War. Apollo trying to attract Princess Cassandra's attention. These paintings show the intellectual and cultural sophistication of Roman life. People didn't just eat. They ate while surrounded by art depicting classical mythology. The room is 15 by 6 meters with black walls possibly designed to hide soot from oil lamps. This is new knowledge. This is a building and artistic tradition that scholars didn't know existed before the excavation. In June 2024, a shrine was discovered with rare blue-painted walls and images of the Horae the Four Seasons. Bronze vessels, amphorae, and evidence of multi-generational family businesses with children's names carved into walls. Real families, real inheritances, real connections between generations. A parent passes a business to a child. The child carries on the work. Names are carved into walls to mark ownership or celebrate a success. These are the kinds of human relationships that bind societies together. Pompeii shows us that Roman civilization wasn't some abstract historical concept. It wasn't just emperors and senators and philosophical treatises. It was made of individuals with hopes, dreams, problems, humor, and connections. It was the working class making a living, the middle class conducting commerce, the people whose stories would never be written in history books, but whose existence shaped the actual reality of Rome. Pompeii is their testimony. They couldn't write, but archaeology is their voice. Part 4. The Mysteries and Questions. Where did everyone go? But Pompeii also raises profound questions that we still can't fully answer. How many people actually died? Estimates range from 2,000 to 20,000, with most scholars believing the number is somewhere in the middle. We only found about 1,150 bodies. Where are the rest? The most likely answer is that they escaped. They survived the eruption. They ran. But were there others who survived for days or weeks after the eruption, buried under ash, before finally succumbing to starvation or exposure? And did rescue parties from neighboring cities come to dig people out? Did they save anyone? Or were they driven back by the toxic volcanic air? The wealthy man and his slave. In November 2020, archaeologists discovered 2 men in a thick layer of ash, a wealthy man and his slave. The evidence suggests they escaped the first phase of the eruption. They survived the pumice and ashfall, but then the pyroclastic surge killed them. They made it through the first night and died the next day when the heat wave hit. What were they thinking? Were they trying to escape to safety in the countryside? Did they think the danger had passed? Were they going back to secure valuables or family members? Were they helping each other? Though archaeology doesn't tell us. All we know is that they were together when death came. Evidence of rescue attempts. Why do some bodies show signs of being moved or disturbed after death? Were there rescue attempts? Did survivors try to help the dead before they themselves perished? Or were the bodies moved by the force of the pyroclastic surge itself? In the gladiator barracks, warriors and enslaved people died together. In death, they were equal. But what does this tell us about social bonds in crisis? Did these men know each other? Did they try to help each other? Or was the barracks simply a place where many people happened to be when the surge came? The experience of death. Some plaster casts show faces twisted in agony. Others look almost peaceful, as if they accepted death calmly. What was the actual experience of dying in a pyroclastic surge? Did people have time to think about their lives? To feel fear? To pray? Or did death come too quickly for conscious thought? Was it instantaneous and therefore painless? Or did it linger seconds that felt like minutes as the body slowly cooked? Were people aware in those final moments? These are questions that science can't fully answer. The chariot. Desperate escape. In 2024, the discovery of a decorated ceremonial chariot at Civita Juliana, a villa outside Pompeii, revealed evidence of horses still in harness. Someone was trying to escape on a chariot when death came. Bodies of 2 people fleeing were found nearby. This is trauma preserved in the archaeology. The desperate attempt to escape by vehicle, as if speed and horses could outrun a pyroclastic surge traveling at 70 miles per hour. The failure to escape. The eternal freeze. The biggest mystery. What remains buried? And the biggest mystery of all, 1/3 of Pompeii remains unexcavated. 2/3 has been uncovered. 1/3 is still buried beneath volcanic debris. What lies beneath? What other buildings? What other frescoes? What other inscriptions? What other insights into how humans lived 2,000 years ago? Maybe entire neighborhoods we haven't discovered. Maybe artworks more spectacular than what we've found. Maybe evidence that would change our understanding of Roman society. The excavation isn't finished. The story isn't complete. There's still so much to discover. Part 5. Rediscovery and Modern Breakthroughs. For 1,500 years, Pompeii was lost, buried, forgotten. The area became known as La Civita, the city, because locals noticed strange features in the ground, unusual rocks, strange stratifications, artifacts that looked old. But the connection to the ancient Roman city of Pompeii was lost. History forgot. Early rediscovery. In 1592, an architect named Domenico Fontana was digging an underground aqueduct to transport water for a noble family. His workers broke through into ancient walls covered in paintings and inscriptions. He recognized these as remains of an ancient city, but he kept the discovery secret. Perhaps he feared that digging would anger the landowners. Perhaps he didn't fully understand the significance. The discovery was forgotten. In 1689, another discovery, an inscription mentioning a town official, evidence that this was a city. The connection took more time. Finally, in 1748, Spanish engineer Roque Joaquín de Alcubierre began systematic excavations. On August 20th, 1763, an inscription was found that definitively identified the site as Pompeii. The ancient city had been rediscovered. The connection was made. The world realized what had been buried. Scientific archaeology. What followed was 2 centuries of mixed efforts, some haphazard excavation, some treasure hunting, some looting, and gradually, a evolution towards scientific archaeology. Valuable artifacts were removed to museums without proper documentation. Walls were broken through without careful recording, but knowledge slowly accumulated. In 1863, Giuseppe Fiorelli took charge of the excavations and revolutionized the approach entirely. He invented the plaster cast technique, which allowed him to capture the exact forms of people who had died nearly 2,000 years earlier. He divided the entire city into regions and blocks, creating a system for understanding the urban layout. In the 1920s, Amedeo Maiuri took over and excavated the southern portions in the largest archaeological effort since Fiorelli. He discovered the bakeries, workshops, fulleries, laundries, where cloth was cleaned shops, and inscriptions that made Pompeii truly extraordinary. He uncovered the mundane details of life. He found the businesses. He found the ordinary. The modern era, pause, and acceleration. But for decades after Maiuri, excavations were haphazard and often careless. The site was being damaged by tourism and poor preservation practices. After the 1980 earthquake damaged the site significantly, the decision was made to halt large-scale excavations and focus on preservation of what had already been uncovered. In 1999, a moratorium on excavations was declared. Pompeii would be preserved, not further disturbed. But in 2017, the moratorium was lifted. New technology had arrived. New understanding of how to excavate properly had developed. Since then, discoveries have accelerated dramatically. In 2018, archaeologists found harnessed horses still in the Villa of the Mysteries. In December 2020, the Thermopolium with duck bones and fish sauce. In January 2021, the ceremonial chariot. In 2021, a painted tomb of a freed slave showing the social mobility that was possible in Roman society. In April 2024, a dining hall with new frescoes depicting Helen of Troy. In June 2024, a shrine with rare blue-painted walls, LiDAR technology, seeing through the earth. Crucially, LiDAR technology is revealing hidden structures beneath unexcavated areas. LiDAR, also known as light detection and ranging, uses laser pulses to scan the ground and create detailed three-dimensional maps of what lies beneath the surface. Using this technology, archaeologists are discovering entire buildings, streets, and architectural features that have never been excavated. Pompeii is still teaching us. The excavation isn't finished, and new technology is showing us what we didn't know. Conclusion: what Pompeii means. Pompeii is ultimately a meditation on the fragility of human civilization and the permanence of human connection. It shows us that civilizations aren't abstract historical concepts. They're made of individual people. People with hopes and fears and food preferences and jokes and relationships. It shows us that disaster can come without warning and change everything in a single day. It shows us that the objects we leave behind, a loaf of bread in an oven, a love note scratched on a wall, a child's homework tablet, a mother's final embrace with her child, these are what archaeologists find thousands of years later. These are what make us real. And it reminds us that thousands of years from now, someone might be excavating our cities, trying to understand how we lived. What artifacts would they find? What would they learn about you? What stories would your life tell? That's the power of Pompeii. It makes history personal, it makes the dead human, and in doing so, it reminds us that we're all temporary, we're all just passing through. We're living in a moment that will someday be history. The question is, what will we leave behind?